Welcome to the Retirement Trainer. Today, we're excited to be joined by Dr. Daniel Crosby, psychologist, behavioral financial expert, and best-selling author. Dr. Crosby has built a reputation for helping investors understand not just the numbers, but the mindset behind smart financial decisions. His books, including The Behavioral Investor, reveal how emotions and human behavior impact our wealth far more than we realize. In today's conversation, he'll share powerful insights on how to align your thinking, your habits, and your investments to creating lasting financial success. Let's dive in.
Well, as much as I enjoyed your talk in Atlanta, Maui, that it was really good. So we read your bio at the very beginning, but you got your PhD in psychology. Now you're in behavioral finance. And so first of all, so how did you make that shift from a psychologist to behavioral finance? Because it's very similar, but it is completely, different. I mean, it seems like at one end of the spectrum to the other.
Yeah, before I answer that, are we still just chatting it up or did you want to be recording?
Yeah, I'm already recording. We're good. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
you're recording?
Oh yeah, yeah. I start from the very yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I had no idea. I had no idea. Okay,
No, no,
cool.
no. It's yep. You're good.
Then I'll answer it more professionally then.
No, no. This is a conversation. You're great.
I talked a little bit. I went to 1 year of school with an idea of doing what my dad did. My dad is a financial advisor. But then after that year of school, I did some general ed. I was missionary in Manila for a couple of years, and I came back, going from this kid from Alabama to Southeast Asia and living for 2 years, your mind is expanded by seeing different cultures and different ways of being and different ways of acting. And I came back completely fascinated with people. And so I said, look, I've got to study human behavior. I've got to study psychology. About this same time, someone very close to me had developed a very serious eating disorder. And she was in inpatient treatment in Utah where I was going to school. And so I became a sort of intermediary between my friend and her family. And I was kind of the one checking up on her and taking her out when she had a day off or something like that. And so I was interfacing with the doctors and seeing how important the work they did was. And so I just fell deeper in love with psychology. So that really kind of the combination of the mission and that experience really put me on a path for psychology. And I started my PhD 3 days after I finished my bachelor's degree. I was just like straight on, knew what I wanted. Well, toward the end of my PhD, you have to do thousands of hours of counseling, face-to-face counseling, in completion of your hours. I, I was burnt out. I was all of 27 years old when I was finishing up my PhD, but I was working with, people with ankle bracelets, court-ordered folks and
Mhm.
and different folks who, just heavy stuff, like seeing very heavy stuff at a young age. And I said, look, I still love studying humanity. I love studying human behavior, but I think I want to do it in a non-medical, non-clinical context. So I went to my father, who, is and was and is a financial advisor, and I said, Dad, I I want to study human behavior, but I don't think I want to do it in this context. Do you have any ideas? And he said, well, there's a ton of psychology in my work. And that shocked me because I had always, in my naivete, had always conceptualized of my father as sort of one part stock picker and one part sales guy. That's sort of who he was sort of an asset gatherer who, looked at charts and picked stocks. That's sort of what he did in my mind. And so this is, whatever, 16, 17 years ago. my dad, who's an advisor in North Alabama, where I grew up, didn't know anything about behavioral economics or behavioral finance per se, but he knew that his work was profoundly relational. He knew that his work was behavioral, and that he had an intuition that some of the best things he did for his clients were to keep them invested and keep them motivated and keep them focused on their goals. So to make to make a very long road short, that is the conversation that put me on the path to try and be a translator between the ivory tower of academia
Hmm.
and people like you, people like my father, who are in the trenches every day with clients doing the work. I saw an opportunity to say, look, there's a lot of cool research being done here in behavioral finance, but it's not trickling down to the people who are doing the work. And I speak both languages, and I think I can be a translator.
Well, you know what? Translate. Yeah, that's a great term because you take the very complicated and you simplify it so that even someone like myself could understand it. In your books, in your talks, and everything else, and a lot of it doesn't seem like it should be, but it really is kind of common sense.
Mm.
When you're talking about behavioral finance. And having a purpose. I mean, you were kind enough to give kind of a preview of the first five chapters of your new book, which is great. I actually finished reading this on the way down to Atlanta the first time I heard you speak. And there's a lot of things in there that I didn't realize were behavioral finance that we were already doing, like rules-based investing and just, some of the other things that you talk about. So uh, when we talk about behavioral finance, how can you simplify that so that people understand? It just seems almost like a generic term.
Yeah, I'll give you the Alabama definition, the Alabama guy definition,
There
right?
we go. Roll Tide. All right.
I'm actually War Eagle. We got a big game tomorrow. But
Yes, yes, you do. Yes, you do.
yeah. So behavioral finance is just finance that accounts for the messiness of human nature. There's a more technical definition of that. But if you look at the old econometric models, old models of finance and economics were built on the assumption that humans were utility maximizers. So utility maximizers means we always make decisions that are in our best interests. And I don't know about how you've lived your life and the decisions you've made, but I haven't always. Not every decision I've ever made has been optimal for the kind of person I want to be and the kind of life I want to lead. And so that's more true of money than just about anything because money is so emotional. Um, I'll talk more about that in a second, but money is so emotional that we tend to make very emotional decisions around it. So behavioral finance is just saying, hey, it's not robots that are making these decisions. It's not people who are always doing the best thing every time. It's people with hopes, fears, dreams, histories, and we have to account for those hopes, dreams, and histories when telling them how to think and act with their money.
Yeah, and so as you were going through logging in these thousands of hours, was there a common denominator that you saw with your dad's clients or in clients in general, the general public that was consistent all the way across the board?
Things that people did that to make mistakes with their money.
Yeah. Hmm.
So there's really four that I talk about. So it's ego, emotion, attention, and conservatism. So if I may, I'll touch on each of those briefly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So ego is just the various flavors of our human overconfidence. We tend to think that we're smarter than average, that we're luckier than average, and that we're more knowledge about the future than we actually are. So this constellation of different, flavors of overconfidence means, we don't always get the help we need. We might trade too much, we might do too much, we might save too little because we think that, bad stuff happens to other people and I'm different, I'm special, I know better. And so ego is I see you smiling. Ego,
Yes,
a big
yes,
one.
right.
Yeah. So the second one is emotion. We have evolved to sort of privilege our heart over our head. And again, money is this profoundly emotional topic. So we have these intuitions, we have these desires, we have these urges with money, and candidly, they're usually wrong. Like there's places where intuition and emotion serve us very well. We tend to be very good at sizing each other up. Like if you meet someone and they kind of give you the creeps or you don't like them or you feel like they may not be the best, you're probably right. Like there's probably something there. We're quite good at using intuition and emotion in some places,
Hmm.
but we're quite bad at it with money. And there's some reasons why that's the case, but our intuitions about money tend to be wrong. And when it comes to capital markets in particular, we tend to feel the safest or the most enthusiastic when stocks are the most expensive, and we tend to feel the most fear when the opportunity is the largest. And so we're almost 180 degrees backwards of where we ought to be with respect to emotion and money. So that's when we got to get straight. Attention has largely to do with our media diet and the kinds of things we pay attention to. We tend to confuse things that are loud with things that are likely. Um, an easy example of this, I think I talked about it at our meeting in Hawaii. When I lived in Hawaii previously for a summer with my wife when we were newlyweds, the very first show I watched upon arrival in Hawaii was Shark Week on Discovery Channel, which is a huge problem, as it turns out. That's not the first thing you want to see when you get to Hawaii. Well, I scarcely got in the water above my knees, when we were in Hawaii for 4 months. And then I got home and I start reading up on the actual probability of being bitten by a shark. And it's like, you're more likely for your pajamas to catch on fire, like you're more likely to die in a shaving accident. I mean, it's just like it's just, you know, it's so remote. Like it's so remote. And yet it was very the psychological term for it is salient. It was easy for me to imagine. And so investors do the same thing. They confuse things that are loud with things that are likely. So something that's loud would be like a depression or a recession. So what's happening is investors are always tuned in for like, when's the big one gonna come? Like, when's the next great financial crisis gonna come? All the while they're ignoring the fact that they're uninvested and inflation's killing their wealth, or they're, paying too high of fees in one area of their life, or, they're not worried about the engine of their wealth, which is their earning power, and they need to go back to school or get that trade certification. So we tend to focus on sort of uh, high impact but improbable things and ignore some of the daily grind that's much more likely to get you. And then the last one is conservatism. Conservatism is our tendency to be status quo prone and risk averse. We like what we know and we like stuff that's safe. And so this leads people to fail to invest internationally. It leads people to over-index on maybe the industry that they're working in and sort of own too much there and to not take enough risk. So these are sort of the four big human tendencies: the ego, emotion, conservatism, and attention.
Yeah, you're talking about the news and commentators or pundits. I always use the saying, "If it bleeds, it leads." Right? It's if the sky is not falling, then they're not getting the viewership, and people aren't paying attention. And so they like to drive that panic to a certain degree so that people react. Um, And if they don't have a system or a process in place, they will act usually to their detriment, at least from our experience doing this over the years. Um, so, in your book, one of your books, you talk about rule-based investing. Actually, you talk about rule-based behavioral investing. So, when we invest, I'm severely OCD. Everything is a process, right? It's all about the rules, because we do take the emotion out of it, and it's automated to a certain degree. But when you add rule-based behavioral, is there a difference between the two?
Really, the rule-based behavioral investing was an attempt for me to sneak in a baseball reference because it's RBI. I'm a big baseball
Oh.
guy. But no, I think what I'm advocating there is largely what you're talking about as well. Um, what we find in the research is, and this is hard for people to get their brains around, but in many endeavors that require human discretion, most endeavors that require human discretion, simple rules beat even PhD level knowledge time and time again. And they're faster, they're cheaper, not only are they better, they're faster, they're cheaper, they're easier to follow. So we don't like this idea. We like the idea that we should be paying a bunch of PhD wizards to, go through and find us the next hot stock. And we want to believe that there's something to that. The research shows that there really isn't, and that simple checklists, simple processes, and simple rules are a much better guide because when humans get involved, things again get messy. And what we see is this works for diagnosing patients, which I mean, I think is largely going to be an AI endeavor in the years to come.
Yep.
Everything from diagnosing patients to determining who gets out of prison. One of my favorite studies from one of my books we've got 1% of our US population in jail at any given time, which is staggering.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we're always trying to do is decide, who needs to stay and like who's been rehabilitated. And so historically, what they've done is they've brought people like me in, people with fancy degrees in human behavior, and I look them in the eyes and, ask them if they've found religion and if they've, changed their ways and if they're a new person. And people, even experts, are shockingly bad at determining who's rehabilitated and who's not, and people's tendency to reoffend is dramatically high. What they've done now is they've switched to two basic rules. The two things they look at now are they're not going to ask you if you're reading scripture or if you've, helped a little old lady across the road or anything like that. They're going to say, what were you in for? Okay, like what brought you to prison in the first place? Like how violent, how bad was it?
Mhm.
And then how did you act while you were here? They're not going to ask you if you're reformed, we're just going to look at your behavior. And those two things have led to a nearly 400% increase in the efficacy of judgments about who's reformed and who's not. You don't need a panel of PhDs, you just look at two things. Same thing is true of markets. I mean, if you just get a couple of things right, the couple of the most important things, and I talk about, your mileage may vary. My most important things like price, things like quality, things like momentum, when you're talking about creating a portfolio, you get a couple of those things right, it goes a very long way, and you can do it, more quickly and more affordably.
That is really, it almost seems too simple.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. So, when we're talking about that and keeping it simple, so does it make more sense to, instead of trying to pick stocks, go along the way of passive investments, or to truly have, a rule-based system to do what you just did, or what you just explained in the prison system?
So I will answer your question. I want to talk about this too simple thing.
Yeah.
Um, you're a very fit guy. The only reason I did your podcast is so I could ask you for the arm workout once we're done here, right? So, so you're a fit guy. In the last year and a half, I've really like taken my health back and I've lost a bunch of weight and people see this in me and they'll ask me, "What did you do?" And I tell them I'm like I was in a protein surplus and a calorie deficit. That's all, and they're like, but what else? Like, are you working out 3 hours a day? Are you taking, Ozempic? Are you taking drugs? Are you doing this? Are you doing special exercise? I'm like, no, literally, that is it. Like, that is the only thing I have changed, and it has revolutionized my health. And no one can believe it's that easy. Of course, it's not that easy. I mean, like, doing it is hard.
Right.
But the power of consistently following best practices day after day after day is enormous. And sometimes I call these River Jordan problems. There's a story in the Bible, right? If we can go there for a
Oh,
second.
absolutely.
There's
Absolutely.
a there's a story in the Bible where Naaman is this powerful military and civic leader, and he has a big problem though. He has leprosy. He has this horrible skin condition, and he has this horrible disease. And so he goes to the holy man and he says, "Hey, you gotta help me. Like I got this leprosy. Help me. How do I get rid of this?" And the holy man says, "Hey," the prophet says, "Hey, you got to go bathe in the river Jordan 7 times. Go bathe in the river Jordan." And Naaman, who's this rich, powerful guy, goes, "What are you talking about? Like, the river Jordan is gross. Like, that it's not even a nice river. I got better rivers that I could go to. Why would I go here?" And one of his servants comes to him and says, "Master, if he had asked you to do something hard, you would have done it. So just do the thing, like, just do the thing he asked you to do." And then he does it and he's healed. Like, that's our financial lives so many times. The answers are they're simple, but they're not easy. And people,
Yep.
yeah, they're simple. It's like diet and exercise, right? It's simple, but it's not easy. And people want it to be more complex than it is. So now, finally, after a small sermon answering your question,
No, no, that's great. That's right. Because it does. It takes discipline, right? In anything.
yeah,
Yeah. And that's
yeah.
discipline is hard.
So stocks versus ETFs versus mutual funds, it kind of doesn't matter. Like, I mean, I wrote the book because I do believe there is a way to invest that's a little better. But for 90% of the world, could they get to where they need to be with a pretty simple setup? Absolutely. If they're consistent and they do those, they don't fall prey to this River Jordan fallacy of thinking that it has to be complex for it to be impactful.
Yeah, I think one of your book, I don't know which one it was that I read, but you actually shared the story about you were talking about price, right? And you it was a speech that you gave, and they said that it was horrible, that you were a poor speaker, or something along those lines. Yeah, and so do me a favor, just share that story. You're going to be able to share it way better than I am. I'm going to kill
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So this was early in my public speaking career. So I wasn't a terrible speaker. I did a good job. So I get off stage. I was a large insurance company had me sort of in their stable of presenters, and I was doing a lot of work for them. And they have this, again, this sort of stable of presenters with the price for each. And so what happened though was my price was very, very low because I was young and I was just sort of starting out. And so I had these one or two reps that I would work with, and they knew I was good and they would use me a lot. But one of them came to me one day and said, "Hey, I've got to tell you, when people look at our sheet and they see what you cost, they assume you're no good. So you actually need to raise your price. So I went home and tripled my price and got more busy. And there's this relationship, there's this perceived value with price. I mean, you see this absolutely everywhere. Like, you know, is a Rolex watch 3 times better than a Tudor watch? Like, not really. But like, is there a better story? There is. And what's fascinating, they do fMRI studies. So like think about brain scan studies,
Mhm.
and they'll give people wine. They'll give people wine and measure their enjoyment of the wine. And when you show people the price, right? When you show people the price of the wine is a huge determinant of the enjoyment of the wine. In the absence of price, though, when they're just, giving people wine and seeing how much they enjoy it, people actually enjoy sort of mid-priced wine the most. But then when you add the price back, the price starts to be a determinant of that. Triad did this recently. They had the wine expert at Triad blind taste test some stuff, and
Feeling,
he
yeah.
was like, "This one's a little more expensive, but I actually like this one more." So we have to be careful about these little psychological tricks where we can confuse price and value.
So I'll share the story with you. So my wife and I years ago we were in a wine club, and once a month we'd all go. We'd have a limit up to $20, and it would be based on regions of the country or the world, whatever it was. And so you would take it, you'd decork it before you came in. You put it in a brown paper bag, and everyone was assigned a number. So you would put that number on it, so no one knew what it was. And this one gentleman who was a sommelier brought in a unbelievably expensive bottle. It was a couple $100. And the rest of us had these $20 bottles of wine, and his came in last until everyone found out how expensive it was. They're like, actually, it really wasn't that bad.
Exactly. Working
We're like, wait, what?
justify. Yeah. Working backwards to justify.
Yeah, yep, yep. So, as your progression of your books, it's shifted, but it really hasn't. I think, from the laws of wealth, even to your newest one, you talk about purpose, and for us, one of the things that I always say that the math is the math, right? The math is the easy part. The hard part is, what is your purpose? Because that's the biggest thing that we see. The goal for everyone is to be able to retire, and that's the finish line. Now the race is over. What we're trying to re-educate people to have a purpose. Once you retire, then what are you going to do? If you had all the money in the world, money was no object, what would you do? Where would you live? What's important to you? Excuse me. Is it family? Is it your grandkids? Is it leaving a legacy? Is it your church? Whatever it is. So, if you don't mind, just kind of go into that aspect of it, because I think that that's probably the biggest um, blank or blind spot that people have, void, for lack of a better term, and why it's so important, especially as it relates to money and finance and life after retirement.
Yeah, so this is my soapbox of all soapboxes. I feel like purpose is the key that unlocks every door. And I think many people understand why purpose is so powerful in personal or perhaps spiritual or existential pursuits, but I
Mhm.
don't think people understand how powerful it is with money. So let me share a few bits of research there. I think I shared this in at least one of our the meetings that you've been in. But there's research that shows that people who look at a picture of their families before they make a financial decision, excuse me, make dramatically better decisions and save more money than people who don't. Now, you can't always, be looking at a picture of your family, but what it shows us is that when we tie purpose back to money, when it's about something bigger than the dollars themselves, we make better decisions and we make better choices. People who label their accounts, you know, um, Ed's retire to Hawaii fund instead of just fund 123 ABC, they had 15% more on average and were 10 times less likely to sell out in a choppy market. And so we see all of these boats that get lifted by purpose. The final one I'll share is that people who worked with their advisor to get very visual with their purpose, you know, not just like, hey, I want to retire, I need $1 million, but like, hey, I want to retire to Park City. This is where I want my house to be. This is where the grandkids are going to play. This is where I'm going to go on walks with my wife. This is where I'm going to have my coffee. This is where we have dinner. Just like really like build the dream. Make it as visual, make it as salient as those sharks were to me. Like salience is what drives behavior. So people who work with their advisor to make that dream visual and salient and vivid, they had about 73% more savings than those who did not. So purpose isn't this like nice to have. It's not this kumbaya, like, out there woo-woo consideration. Visualizing your dream and getting your arms around what that's going to look like is a very practical means by which you can make better decisions with your money.
Wow. I mean, that's actually a reality. I never thought about, looking at your family,
Mm,
a picture of your family before making financial decisions. I can't even imagine. I'm trying to do that right now. The impact that that would have as
mhm.
to, am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing something a little bit different?
Yeah,
Um, and naming the account. So, we do that. It's when people retire, withdrawal order, where is it coming from? Instead of having everything commingled in one account, separating it out so that people can actually see the difference.
yeah,
Um,
powerful.
so, all right, your last your current book that you just finished. It's even more in depth into having a purpose. That's actually part of the title. Why did you go down that path? I mean, going from behavioral finance and numbers, I mean, it just seems like incrementally it's become more personal
Mm.
for the individual, from a behavioral standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, to having that purpose. What made that change?
There's a couple of things. One is we'll go back to the River Jordan. There's only so many ways to skin the cat of saving and investing for retirement. I mean, it's not that hard. Like if
Yeah. Yep.
it's there's not 100 books I could write about, best practices with managing your money. There turns out there's like two. And so, I wrote those books and I had sort of said what I had to say about that, and I hope people will read them and follow that advice. The other thing is just as you get more of a name, as you have more money, as you have more freedom, you're more free to write the kind of stuff you want to. And so part of it was just the natural arc of my career. The book that you got a sneak peek of in Hawaii, that's the book I've always wanted to write, but have just been working on for years, trying to get it right. The other thing is probably like you, my job puts me in proximity to a lot of really wealthy people. And some of those people have taken their wealth and have spent and given it and invested it in ways that have made them truly happy and that have contributed to holistic, like capital T, capital W, true wealth. Others among the very wealthy folks I know have done none of those things. And it's never enough for them. And they're not satisfied and they're miserable and their money has complicated their lives. And that's sad for me to see that people who can, in some respects, have so much can simultaneously have so little. And
Hmm.
so the reason why I wrote The Soul of Wealth and then indeed this new meaning book is Viktor Frankl, my professional hero, has this quote, ever more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. It's like, how do we take that money? You've worked so hard, you made it, like you made it across the finish line. So don't blow it now on poor personal decisions and greed. How can we take that money, that wealth you've created, be a blessing to yourself, your family, and to the world in a way that's going to lead to enduring happiness? And that I think is missing. That's a far more complicated conversation, I think, than like how do I create a good asset allocation.
Oh, you know what? It absolutely it is, and it brings me. I was just thinking about it as you were saying it. I want to say the poem is called "The Dash." Does that sound familiar? It
The
talks
dash
about.
on a gravestone?
Yeah, you're right, right. So
Yeah.
it's the the date that you were born and the date that the good Lord calls you home and what you've done in that interim, that dash in between. And it's not about um, the wealth, the cash, the cars, the homes, or anything else. It's about the people that you've lived life with and really loved along the way. And so I think at the end it says, I'm going to paraphrase it. It says something along the lines, when someone's giving your eulogy, what are they going to say about your dash, right? And so that's really what it is. Does your life have meaning? And what is your purpose? And is it just at retirement, or can we create a behavior or help you understand, or at least this is what we're trying to do for, our those families that we serve. What is your purpose now? Your legacy doesn't have to be when you pass away and what's left behind. You can leave a living legacy right now. And what does that look like, right? So it's the math, the money, that's the easy part. It's everything else that kind of goes into it when you're building a plan. That's the meat and potatoes of it. And that's what people forget. And I think that's why they're unhappy a lot of times.
You're absolutely right. And keeping with the graveyard theme, like go walk around a graveyard and look at what is there on the headstones. It says stuff like uh mother, brother, father, trusted friend. What's not on there is your net worth. How many times you were named, how many times you were named best advisor of the year.
Yeah.
None of these things are on there. And we tend to it's very easy for us to get lost in the minutia of making a living or the rat race or whatever. And we forget that, when the dash is all said and done, what matters most is relationships. If I may, like one of the things that I've really enjoyed, one of the frameworks that I enjoyed putting together in the new book, I would tell people would say, what are you writing about now? And I would say the meaning of life. And people are like, huh? Like, you know, like that's some sort of unknowable. And I mean, look, and I get it in the most dramatic sense. It is, maybe it is unknowable. But what I found in the research is that people who have meaningful lives, people who have happy, joyful, fulfilled lives, it really comes down to three B's. It's believing, belonging, and becoming. So, what we know from the psychological research, people whose dash is well lived, first, they believe in something. They have a moral compass, they have values, they have rules by which they live their life, and they try and bring those rules to the world, right? They try and make whatever their idea of justice, equality, goodness, kindness, mercy, they have a personal code of conduct and they live that and they try and help others live it. That's the believing piece. You need a map for making sense of the world. The next one is the most important. Every research study would tell you this is the most powerful. It's belonging. Are you good to your folks? Your spouse, your children, your grandkids, your community. Do you have a tribe of people, probably a small tribe, who love you and who you love, right? And then the last one is becoming. Do you have a vision for your own personal growth and your own personal betterment? That's it. That's the whole ball game. Do you have rules for living? Are you giving and receiving love? And are you striving to be a little bit better person every day? Do you have a vision for who you could become? That's it. That's the meaning of life. It's not that complicated. Again, it's hard to do, but those are the ways that we measure that dash: believing, belonging, and becoming.
Wow. Yeah. You know what? I can't think of a better way to end the podcast because I don't know exactly what else to say after that because that really sums it all up.
Yeah.
So, Daniel, I really appreciate it. I know how very busy you are, so I really appreciate your time. And yeah, I hopefully we will see you soon at another event because yeah, they're great. I really enjoy it. So thank you.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. All right. Take care.
Thank you for listening to The Retirement Trainer with your host, Ed Siddell. For our latest retirement news and financial tips, please visit egsifinancial.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We look forward to having you back for our next episode, where we will continue to explore the world of retirement. Until then, please remember to click, like, and subscribe. See you next episode.